I sat on the porch, the rough wood beneath my fingers reminding me of all the years we'd spent here as a family. The morning sun streamed through the leaves overhead, casting dappled light on the faded letters scattered across my lap. Each envelope was a reminder of our tangled history with the HOA, their demands pressing against us like an unyielding weight. Kate walked out, her footsteps soft but purposeful. I could see the worry etched on her face as she leaned against the doorframe, arms crossed tightly over her chest. "Have you read Section 4.2 yet?" she asked, her voice carrying a hint of urgency that made me uneasy. "Not yet," I replied, trying to keep my tone steady. I felt my heart race at the thought of what those letters contained, threats to take legal action if we didn't comply with their ever-changing rules. It wasn't just about money anymore. It was about our dignity and honor. Just then, Sam swung open the gate and strolled in, his presence filling the space around us. "What's going on?" he asked casually, but I could see a flicker of concern in his eyes. He leaned down to pick up one of the letters from my lap, unfolding it slowly as if it were a fragile artifact. The air thickened with tension. Each word he read deepened the furrow in his brow, and I could feel Kate's anxiety rising beside me. "This is serious," he said flatly, glancing between us. "They're not playing around." Kate straightened up, determination washing over her features. "We need to fight back," she declared firmly, her gaze locking on to mine for support. "We can't let them push us around like this." Her words hung in the air like an unspoken challenge. My mind raced through implications. Could we really stand up to them? But there was something else brewing beneath my resolve, fear of what might happen if we didn't act swiftly. Sam nodded slowly, weighing Kate's words. "You're right," he finally agreed, "but we need a solid plan." In that moment, everything shifted. The power dynamic had changed. Kate and Sam were no longer just sounding boards for my thoughts. They were ready to take action alongside me. Yet another question lingered in my mind. Would our collective strength be enough against an organization that had so much control over our lives? The uncertainty gnawed at me as I glanced at those letters again. Their crisp edges seemed sharper now, filled with hidden consequences waiting to unfold. As I watched my family debating next steps, I couldn't shake off that nagging feeling deep within. This battle was only beginning, and already felt impossibly heavy upon our shoulders. The door swung open with a creak, revealing the figure of my old friend James. His face was etched with worry, and for a moment I wondered if he had just walked off the pages of a legal thriller. In his hands he clutched a thick file, a fresh piece of evidence that could tip the scales in our favor. "Bob," he said, urgency lacing his voice, "you need to see this." He stepped inside before I could respond, the scent of his aftershave mingling with the stale air of my office. He placed the file on my cluttered desk as if it were a fragile artifact from another time. I flipped through the documents, my heart racing. There it was. A witness statement that contradicted everything we'd been told about the case. This wasn't just a glimmer of hope, it was an avalanche ready to bury our opposition. The walls felt like they were closing in, but this revelation opened up new possibilities. But then came the realization that this would not be easy. Helen had been adamant about sticking to her original strategy, and she would resist any major changes. Pushing against her decision could create friction within our team, something we couldn't afford right now. "What do you think?" James asked me, as I stared at the damning words on the page. "This could change everything." His eyes bore into mine, searching for assurance or perhaps guidance. I took a deep breath and closed my eyes for a moment. "We need to talk to Helen first," I finally said, already knowing how she might react. But deep down, I felt that instinctive pull, the kind that comes when you know something is right even if it feels wrong. As we made our way through the corridors of the courthouse, I could hear my shoes scuffing against the linoleum floor, a reminder of all those times I'd marched for justice. Each step echoed with purpose. But at that moment, doubt crept in like shadows creeping across a sunset. When we reached Helen's office, I hesitated at the doorframe. Her walls were plastered with accolades and newspaper clippings. Each one told a story of struggles overcome and victories won. That history weighed heavily on her shoulders and mine. "Helen?" I called softly as I pushed open the door. She looked up from her computer screen, eyebrows knitted together in concentration. The tension in her face melted slightly when she recognized us, but quickly morphed back into serious concern. "What brings you two here?" she asked, leaning back in her chair as if bracing herself for unwelcome news. James stepped forward first and laid out the new evidence before her like a magician unveiling his greatest trick. "We've got something important," he said earnestly. Helen's expression shifted from curiosity to skepticism as she scanned the pages. "And you want to change our strategy at this stage? You know how much work we've put into this." I felt my heart race. Now was my chance to sway her. "Helen," I began carefully, choosing my words like stones to skip across troubled waters. "This isn't just another lead. It's an opportunity we can't let slip." She held up a hand to silence me as she continued reading. The ticking clock on her wall sounded louder than ever, a countdown to what lay ahead. After what felt like an eternity, she set down the papers and looked us both straight in the eye. "Fine," she finally said with determination lacing her voice. "Let's pivot our approach, but it'll take work." A surge of relief washed over me like cool water on parched land. The power dynamic had changed. Now we were united in pursuit of justice instead of divided by stubbornness. But before I could celebrate internally, Helen leaned forward again with an unsettling intensity in her gaze. "We need to move fast before they catch wind of this," she warned ominously. Her words hung heavy in the air like storm clouds gathering before a downpour. Uncertainty gnawed at me once more, while adrenaline coursed through my veins. What did she know that we didn't? What unseen obstacles lay ahead? That question lingered unspoken between us as we gathered our things and prepared for battle once more, the weight of justice resting heavily upon our shoulders as we stepped into a world where every word mattered and every choice could alter destinies.
The porch creaked beneath me as I leaned against the railing, each groan echoing my uncertainty. Evan had been rummaging through the old boxes in the attic, and I could hear him mumbling to himself. The faint rustle of paper and cardboard filled the air like whispers of long-buried secrets. Then came a sharp intake of breath from him. It pierced through the morning calm. My heart began to race, an instinctual thrum that told me something significant had shifted. Evan appeared at the door, a film roll clutched tightly in his hand, his eyes wide with disbelief. "Dad, look what I found!" he exclaimed, holding it out as if it were a fragile artifact unearthed from an archaeological dig. I could see it was old, its edges worn and yellowed with age. Memories flickered like candlelight in my mind, moments I thought were lost forever. I stepped closer, my fingers brushing against the film roll's surface. It felt rough, yet oddly comforting, like a piece of history begging to be acknowledged. "Where did you find this?" I asked, my voice barely louder than a whisper. "In one of those dusty boxes," he said, excitement radiating from him. But behind his eager eyes lay something deeper, a hint of dread that mirrored my own apprehension. What stories were hidden within? As he unspooled it carefully on the porch floor, fragments of images began to emerge. The sunlight caught the film just right, casting fleeting shadows over our faces as we peered down at it. There was laughter frozen in time, moments I cherished alongside people who had faded from our lives. But then a photograph jolted me. A face I hadn't seen in years stared back at me. My brother Gabe. Confusion clouded my thoughts like fog rolling over a quiet lake. How did this end up here? Why hadn't anyone mentioned these memories before? Evan noticed my silence and looked up, concern etching lines across his young brow. "Are you okay?" he asked gently, sensing the weight of my turmoil. I took a deep breath and nodded slowly, though doubt gnawed at me like a hungry wolf. "Yeah, just surprising." The film roll was more than just images. It held pieces of family history, wrapped in layers of honor and betrayal. Suddenly, Daniel appeared on the porch steps behind Evan, drawn by our hushed conversation. "What's going on?" he asked casually, but couldn't hide his curiosity about Evan's treasure. "Look what I found!" Evan held out the film roll for Daniel to inspect. His interest piqued as he leaned in closer. "I didn't know we had this," Daniel said softly, almost reverently. The shift between us felt palpable. Secrets seemed to dance around us like fireflies on a warm summer night. Then came Helen's voice from inside, the calm authority that always managed to anchor our chaotic family gatherings. "Boys, what are you doing out there?" Her tone pulled at me like gravity. Evan glanced back at her, but quickly returned his focus to the film roll. Nothing would distract him now from this momentous discovery. Helen stepped into view, a vision of strength wrapped in softness, and her gaze fell upon the exposed images sprawled across the porch floor. "What is that?" she asked sharply, her tone shifting as recognition dawned on her face. "It's an old film reel," Evan replied excitedly, but he hesitated when he saw her expression change from curious to concerned. "I think we should put that away for now," Helen said firmly, but her hands trembled slightly as they reached toward the fragile memories laid bare before us. My chest tightened at her words. There was more to this film roll than mere nostalgia. It threatened to unravel layers of truth we'd all carefully avoided for too long. Secrets buried beneath years of silence were clawing their way back into daylight. "Why does it bother you so much?" I challenged softly but resolutely as she knelt beside us to examine it more closely. Her eyes darted away for a moment, before meeting mine again, shadows flickering across her expression like ghosts refusing to rest easy. "Some things are better left untouched," she murmured quietly, yet with conviction. But Evan's enthusiasm surged forth like water breaking through a dam. He wouldn't let go so easily now that curiosity had taken hold of him. "We can watch it together. Maybe it'll help us remember." His voice trailed off into uncertainty as he sensed resistance looming over us all. A decision hung heavy in the air, the kind that demanded courage or risk losing even more than we already had over time's relentless passage. With each second passing by like slow-moving molasses under summer heat, I weighed my options carefully against the chaos brewing within me. Should we open Pandora's box or keep everything safe within its confines? In that heartbeat where silence reigned supreme amid tension thick enough to slice through with a knife, something inside me shifted. A resolve formed from fragments of love and anguish alike, pushing me forward into potential calamity or revelation. "Let's watch it," I declared with unexpected certainty, resonating through my voice despite every fiber fighting against this choice deep down inside me. Evan lit up instantly, while Helen's mouth twitched downward, her lips pressed together tightly as if sealing away unspeakable fears lurking beneath surface-level smiles shared amongst us all for decades now long gone by. The immediate consequence was palpable. Power dynamics shifted among us as anticipation crackled in electric waves across our small gathering. What truths were awaiting us, hidden within those frames? Would they ultimately strengthen our bond or tear apart everything we believed about ourselves? Yet as Helen turned without saying another word and moved toward the house once more, a soft sigh escaping her lips, I couldn't shake off that lingering doubt gnawing at my insides like ravenous birds pecking away at flesh left exposed under harsh sunlight. What would we uncover next? I watched as Helen's eyes narrowed, a storm brewing behind them. The air grew heavy with tension when she finally turned to me, her voice steady but laced with urgency. "We can't let this stand, Bob. Not this time." Her words struck like a match on dried tinder. I could feel the spark ignite within me. It was time to act. We had faced so many injustices together, but this felt different, more personal, more immediate. The case we were working on wasn't just another file buried in the office, it was a life hanging in the balance. Before I could respond, Helen reached for her notebook, flipping through pages filled with notes and strategies. The rustle of paper broke the silence, and I leaned closer, my heart racing as new ideas formed in my mind. She had always been the planner. I was the one who thought tooth and nail in courtrooms. "Listen," she said, her finger landing on a specific page. "There's evidence we haven't submitted yet, witnesses who could corroborate our claims." My thoughts raced ahead of me as I processed her words. This was it, the missing piece we needed to shift the tide in our favor. Yet doubt crept in like shadows at dusk. Would it be enough? "I know it's risky," she continued, sensing my hesitation, "but if we don't do this now, we might lose everything." Her determination washed over me like a refreshing rain after a long drought. I nodded slowly, feeling an unshakable resolve grow within me. "We have to bring them forward," I agreed, swallowing hard against the weight of what lay ahead. As we gathered our things to leave the office, the phone rang sharply, breaking our moment of clarity. The sound echoed against the walls like an unwanted reminder of all that was still unresolved. Helen glanced at me before picking up the receiver. "Hello?" she answered cautiously. I watched her face change as she listened intently. Her brows furrowed deeper with each passing second, until finally she spoke again. Yes, that changes everything." My pulse quickened at her words. Something significant had shifted while I stood there waiting for her to hang up. It felt like standing on shifting sand, exhilarating, yet terrifying. Helen's eyes flickered toward me again as she hung up the phone abruptly. "We just got tipped off about opposition tactics," she said breathlessly, excitement mingling with concern in her voice. "What kind?" I asked quickly. "They're planning to undermine our witnesses before they even take the stand." A chill.
The air on the porch felt dense, like a thick fog draped over my shoulders. I glanced at the doorbell camera, its unblinking eye capturing every moment, every tremor of anticipation. Kate was coming to visit, and I could feel the tension curling in my stomach, a coiled spring ready to snap. As the door swung open, her hesitant smile greeted me. Her eyes darted at the camera before settling on me. A wave of old memories washed over us both, some tender, others sharp enough to cut. I offered a weak smile in return, but it didn't quite reach my eyes. There were things we needed to discuss, things left unsaid that had become heavy stones between us. "Dad?" she began, taking a step inside as if crossing an invisible line. "I know things haven't been easy." Her voice wavered slightly, and I felt the familiar weight of guilt settle on my chest. I wanted to reach out and comfort her, but found my hands clammy against the doorframe instead. Every word we spoke felt like threading a needle through layers of history, delicate and fraught with potential unraveling. Before I could respond, she continued, "We need to talk about Evan." Her words hung between us like an accusation. Just saying his name sent a shiver down my spine. It felt like opening a wound that had never fully healed. "I don't want to rehash the past," I said quietly, struggling to keep my voice steady. The sunlight glinted off the edge of the doorbell camera, a stark reminder of how our lives had been scrutinized and judged by others. It was almost ironic that this device meant to connect us also captured our fractures so clearly. Kate's expression hardened for a moment, her brows knitting together. "You can't just sweep this under the rug anymore." She crossed her arms defensively, and I noticed how much she had grown since those days when I'd carried her on my shoulders. The little girl who believed in heroes was now confronting one who had stumbled. "Look," I said slowly, trying to find common ground amidst our stormy past. "I'm not sweeping anything away." But even as I spoke the words, doubt crept in. The truth loomed over me like a shadowy figure standing just beyond my peripheral vision. Then came another knock on the door, this time heavier than before. It startled both of us. Kate's gaze flickered toward it, and mine followed suit, as if drawn by an unseen force. I opened the door cautiously to reveal Sam standing there with his hands stuffed deep into his pockets. "Hey," he said simply, but his tone hinted at something more urgent beneath the surface. "Sam?" I frowned slightly. He wasn't part of today's plan. Or maybe we'd lost track of what our plans even were anymore. "What are you doing here?" "He heard about Evan," he replied bluntly, as if he'd walked right into a battlefield without armor on. The tension escalated immediately. Kate clenched her fists at her sides while glancing back at me with wide eyes. "What do you mean, you heard?" My voice rose involuntarily. It felt strange hearing myself sound confrontational in front of them both. Sam shifted uncomfortably on his feet before speaking again. "It's all over town. People are talking." Each syllable dropped like stones into a still lake, rippling outward with unsettling implications. "What are they saying?" Kate's voice cracked slightly as she leaned forward, an instinctive reaction fueled by concern for her brother's reputation more than anything else. They think you were involved somehow," Sam said hesitantly, as if walking through a field filled with mines, waiting for one wrong step to detonate everything around him.
My heart sank further into despair. I had fought too hard for justice, only for it to turn against us now? This wasn't how it was supposed to go down. These whispers were nothing more than shadows cast by ignorance and fear. Who is saying these things? My tone turned sharper than intended, more accusatory than inquisitive, but anger bubbled up inside me at the thought of someone tarnishing Evan's name without reason or proof. "The usual suspects," Sam shrugged dismissively, but then paused, as if weighing his next words carefully before adding, "and some who don't know better." Kate ran a hand through her hair nervously. She looked small suddenly under that weight, like an astronaut trying to navigate zero gravity while grasping desperately for something solid amid chaos surrounding her life choices lately. "We need to put a stop to this," she declared suddenly, with newfound determination sparking behind those vibrant blue eyes.
The same firmness from years ago when she stood up against bullies at school or spoke out about injustices within our community during marches we once attended together. You're right, I agreed quickly, despite feeling anxious about where this would lead us all next and whether anyone would listen anyway after everything that had transpired thus far. But another thought struck me. What would happen if we pushed too hard? Would it fracture our family further? In that momentary silence stretched taut between us, three figures standing awkwardly on my porch as heavy clouds gathered overhead threatening rain. I couldn't shake off visions flooding my mind, an avalanche of consequences rushing forward from each decision made tonight, spiraling downward endlessly without control. Just then came another knock at the door, catching everyone off guard once again. A new visitor, perhaps? Or worse yet, someone bringing news none of us wanted. I felt dread wash over me like ice water poured down my spine as Sam opened his mouth again uncertainly while Kate held her breath beside him, waiting. The journey ahead loomed uncertain still, shrouded in fear yet illuminated faintly by hope shining through cracks within broken hearts yearning for resolution despite lingering shadows chasing us relentlessly along this path ahead. The room felt like it was closing in on me. My heart raced as the tension wrapped around us like an old, fraying rope. Helen stood there, her hands clasped tightly, knuckles white against the backdrop of our faded family photos. I caught a glimpse of my own reflection in the window, grizzled hair and worry lines mapping out years spent fighting for justice. "Bob, we can't let this go," she said, breaking the silence. Her voice trembled with urgency. The stakes were higher than ever. I nodded, but doubt gnawed at me. What if we pushed too hard? The last time we confronted them, we lost more than just a case. Just then, our daughter Mia entered through the door, her presence cutting through the heaviness. She wore that determined look I had seen so many times before. "Dad, Mom, are you going to let them get away with this?" she asked, eyes blazing with fire and passion. It was as if she had stepped straight from one of those old photographs, ready to take on the world. Helen turned to Mia, her expression softening. We were just discussing how best to move forward. The warmth in her voice contrasted sharply with the cold reality outside our walls. I could see Mia absorbing everything like a sponge, ready to soak up whatever wisdom we had to offer. Mia paused for a moment, her brows furrowing as if considering something profound. "What if we gather support? Talk to the community?" Her words hung in the air like a delicate thread waiting to be pulled taut. I hesitated, but felt a flicker of hope ignite within me. Maybe rallying people would give us strength against that looming power, the very same force that had tried to silence us for years. Helen's eyes sparkled with possibility as she leaned closer to Mia. "That's not a bad idea." She straightened up, her posture shifting from defeated to determined almost instantly. "Let's reach out, make sure they know what's at stake." The atmosphere shifted. It was palpable as energy surged between us. I felt less like an anchor holding everyone down and more like a sail catching wind once again. But just then, my phone buzzed on the table beside me, a text from an unknown number that read simply, "You have no idea what you're up against." My stomach churned at those words as they echoed ominously in my mind. "Who is it?" asked Helen, glancing over at my phone with concern etched across her face. I hesitated before responding because deep down, I sensed that whatever lay behind that message could either propel us forward or plunge us into darkness, and I wasn't entirely sure which path awaited us next.
The morning sun spilled across the porch, each ray warm against my skin, awakening a sense of urgency. I gripped my Mont Blanc pen tightly. It felt like an anchor in a stormy sea, weighted yet poised for action. Today was different. The air buzzed with unspoken tensions. Evan stepped out from the house, his usual confident stride faltering as he approached me. I could see the worry etched on his face, and it pierced through the calm facade we'd both been trying to maintain. "Bob, we need to talk," he said, his voice low but firm. "What's going on?" I asked. feeling that familiar knot twist in my stomach, a signal that something wasn't right. He handed me a letter, its edges crisp and sharp against my palm. I recognized the stationery immediately. HOA letters sent by our neighborhood association. "You read section 4.2? Evan pressed, urgency clear in his tone. I nodded slowly, scanning the text again. It was all there. The fine print that spoke of hidden fees and penalties buried within legal jargon. The realization hit me like a slap. They were planning to increase assessments based on a loophole no one had noticed until now. I looked up at Evan, my mind racing through the implications of this newfound information. This isn't just about money, it's about our community's integrity. Before I could voice further thoughts, Kate appeared from behind us. Her brow furrowed in concern as she joined our conversation. "What's happening? You both look like you've seen a ghost." "Kate," I began cautiously, not wanting to escalate her anxiety further, "we've discovered some troubling information about the homeowners association." Her eyes widened as she processed what we were saying. She crossed her arms instinctively, as if shielding herself from the harsh reality we had both been trying to maintain. I knew something felt off when they started pushing those new rules, but this is bigger than any of us realized. Evan nodded in agreement, stepping closer to Kate and me, as if drawing us into an alliance forged by shared concern and anger. I couldn't shake off the feeling that this was just the tip of the iceberg. What did these changes mean for our neighborhood? And why were they suddenly pushing this agenda so aggressively? "The board needs to be held accountable," I declared firmly, clenching my Mont Blanc like it was a sword ready for battle. Kate's expression shifted. Determination replaced her initial shock. "You're right, Bob. We have to gather everyone and present this information clearly." In that moment of solidarity among us three, the weight of honor hanging heavy, I sensed an immediate power shift within our group dynamic. We were no longer individuals caught in confusion. We had become advocates for our community's rights. But just as I felt a surge of hope bubbling up inside me, Daniel emerged from inside the house, with a phone pressed tightly against his ear. His face blanched as he listened intently. Whatever news he received seemed to turn his world upside down. "Wait!" He interrupted himself abruptly, while eyeing us with disbelief etched on his features. "No! You're telling me what?" The chill crept over me as he continued listening intently on the line. It felt like an invisible wall rose between us, a barrier formed by secrets yet to be unearthed. "Daniel," I urged, gently once he hung up. "What is it?" He hesitated before speaking again, glancing at each of us nervously, before finally letting out a deep breath laden with dread. "It's worse than we thought. They've been manipulating more than just fees." As those words hung in the air between us like smoke from an extinguished candle, I couldn't help but feel that there was still more hidden beneath the surface, another layer waiting to unravel itself. And standing there on that porch, with sunlight warming my back, yet shadows creeping ever closer around our feet, I began to understand how easily secrets could slip through our fingers, just like sand falling through an hourglass. What lay beneath this chilling revelation? I stood in the middle of the room, feeling the weight of the world press down on my shoulders. The chatter about the upcoming hearing faded into a distant hum as I caught sight of Helen pacing back and forth. Her hands were fidgeting, twisting a thin silver bracelet around her wrist like it was a lifeline. "Bob, we can't let them get away with this," she blurted out, her voice catching slightly in her throat. There was urgency in her eyes that revealed how much this meant to her. I knew she was right. Every injustice felt personal to us both. But just then, a loud knock at the door broke my thought process. It echoed through the tense silence, sending a ripple of anxiety through me. My heart raced as I glanced at Helen, who had stopped pacing to stare at the door as if it held all our answers. I took a step forward, hesitating for just a moment before opening it. Standing there was Thomas, one of our colleagues from the firm. He looked disheveled, his hair askew and papers clutched tightly against his chest as if he was carrying some great secret. "Bob, Helen, you won't believe what I found," he exclaimed breathlessly as he barged into the room without waiting for an invitation. His eyes sparkled with excitement and fear in equal measure. "What is it?" I asked, trying to keep my tone even. The last thing we needed was another distraction when tensions were already running high. Thomas dropped the stack of papers on the table, scattering them across our cluttered workspace. I got hold of some documents from the opposing counsel's office," he said hurriedly, pointing at various pages covered in legal jargon and annotations that made my head spin. Helen leaned in closer, her brow furrowing as she scanned the pages. "This could change everything," she murmured, almost to herself, but I could see the wheels turning behind her eyes. As she processed the information, something shifted within her. It was subtle but palpable. Determination replaced uncertainty. She squared her shoulders and turned toward me with newfound energy. "We have to use this against them," she declared firmly, her voice now steady and resolute. The words hung between us like an electric charge. I felt invigorated by her conviction. We had been fighting against insurmountable odds for months, but now we might be able to break through. However, just as quickly as hope sparked within me, doubt crept back in. "But we'll need more than just these documents," I cautioned gently. "We'll have to prove intent and malice." "Then we gather witnesses," Helen interjected passionately. "We find people who can corroborate what's here." In that moment, Thomas nodded vigorously while rifling through more papers scattered across our table. "I've got contacts who might be willing to testify," he chimed in excitedly. The atmosphere shifted again, the scales tipping toward action rather than despair, but still lingering was that gnawing uncertainty about whether we were prepared for what lay ahead. Would those witnesses come forward? Would they risk their own safety? Before I could articulate my thoughts further, Helen's phone buzzed insistently on the table beside us again, a sharp reminder that time was slipping away faster than we could grasp it. She glanced down at the screen and frowned slightly. "I have to take this," she said reluctantly, but didn't move from where she stood. Instead, she held my gaze for a moment longer than necessary before finally stepping aside to answer. As she spoke softly into her phone, her expression shifting from anxious concern to fierce determination, I couldn't help but wonder how much more news we would receive today, and how it might change everything once again. My thoughts began swirling around like autumn leaves caught in a gust of wind, each one representing a different possibility or consequence waiting around every corner of this fight for justice. What if we pushed too hard? What if we lost someone along the way? I shook my head slightly to clear my mind and focused on Thomas instead. He was still rifling through papers with fervor while glancing up occasionally at Helen's intense conversation behind him. Suddenly, though, a chilling realization struck me. There were deeper stakes involved here than mere legal battles. We were playing with lives that hung delicately in balance amidst our pursuit of truth and justice. What would happen next weighed heavily upon us all like an unspoken promise hanging in the air.
The logs snapped under Gabe's weight as he settled onto the porch chair opposite me. The morning sun, already high, cast sharp shadows that danced between us. I could almost hear the tension crackle in the air, like a wire pulled too tight. I gripped the quota log in my hands, its pages warm and slightly crinkled from last night's rain. "Bob, we need to talk about what happened," Gabe said, his voice low but steady. I felt my pulse quicken. There was an edge to his tone that hinted at secrets unspoken. I leaned forward slightly, bracing myself against the table, trying to avert my eyes from the logs that held our shared history. "Yeah, we do." My voice came out firmer than I expected. "You know why I called you here." He rubbed the back of his neck as if massaging away a burden. "He didn't mean for it to go this far. It was supposed to be just business. Just business." Those words hung between us like smoke from an extinguished candle, familiar yet suffocating.
You think lying about the quota was just business? I couldn't help but let frustration seep into my tone. Gabe shifted in his seat, avoiding eye contact now. The way he looked away told me everything, as if he were trying to erase himself from this moment entirely. It wasn't supposed to hurt anyone, but it did. The heat surged through my veins, fueling my anger with every heartbeat. We're talking about people's lives here. I saw him flinch and knew then that some part of him understood the gravity of what had happened, the betrayal of trust that cut deeper than any financial loss could convey. Before I could voice another thought, Megan appeared at the door behind Gabe, a sight so unexpected it momentarily stunned us both into silence. Her presence shifted the atmosphere completely. She'd always been a calming force amid chaos. With her short curls bouncing gently in rhythm with her steps, she approached us cautiously. "Is everything okay?" she asked softly, concern etching lines across her brow. "No," I replied bluntly, before realizing how harsh it sounded. "We're working through something complicated." She glanced at Gabe and back at me, sensing the tension like a dog smells fear. "What do you mean?" Gabe swallowed hard and finally met my gaze again, his eyes clouded with regret, but also something else. Fear, perhaps? Guilt. "I messed up," he admitted quietly. Megan raised her eyebrows but didn't press further. Instead, she looked down at the quota log resting on the table between us, an artifact now tainted by deceit, rather than a tool for honesty and progress. "Maybe we should all sit down together," she suggested carefully, attempting to bridge a widening chasm of mistrust between us. With a heavy sigh escaping my lips, I nodded reluctantly, but knew that something had already shifted. I could feel it in my bones like a distant thunder rumbling before a storm breaks loose. "I don't know if we can fix this," I confessed, glancing between them both as uncertainty churned within me. At that moment, Helen emerged from inside carrying coffee mugs etched with intricate designs, a ritual we'd shared countless times over years spent together on this very porch. She set them down with deliberation, as if placing fragile glassware on a wobbly table. "What did I miss?" she asked brightly, while glancing at each of our somber faces. Gabe hesitated before answering. He was still trying to find his footing after nearly losing himself in that web of lies he'd spun around us all. "It's about the quotas," he trailed off again, unable to finish his sentence, as though it might unravel everything further. Helen frowned slightly as clarity washed over her features like sunlight breaking through clouds after a long rainstorm. She took one look at me and then back at Gabe, eyes piercing and searching for truth amidst vague explanations. "Well," she pressed gently but firmly, arms crossed against her chest, a stance both protective and demanding respect for our shared values as friends and allies against injustice. "I messed up," Gabe finally confessed again, shame clawed at his insides visibly now. "You've put not just yourself, but everyone involved at risk." My words left my mouth before I could filter their weight or meaning properly. They felt jagged, coming out like shards of glass scraping against skin. Helen remained silent for a moment longer than comfortable, her expression shifting from disappointment toward determination as realization struck deep within her heart, too. This wasn't merely about money lost or reputations tarnished. It was about honor itself being dragged through mud by someone we trusted dearly once upon a time. Enough is enough, Helen suddenly declared with newfound authority radiating from every word, radiating like light refracted through crystal prisms, painting rainbows across walls. Even those broken by betrayal needed some color again eventually. "We'll fix this together," she continued fiercely, yet compassionately, meeting each pair of eyes present, including mine, with unwavering resolve burning brightly behind them all. Gabe opened his mouth to protest but faltered instead. Words caught somewhere between regretful acknowledgment and desperate pleas for forgiveness hung loosely on trembling lips now, tinged pale under growing emotional strain surrounding us collectively, pressing inward closer. As silence enveloped our small circle once more, like autumn leaves falling gracefully around us, slowly filling gaps left behind where warmth once flourished freely without hesitation, we all knew nothing would ever be quite the same again, not after today's revelations nor challenges ahead, forcing choices upon each individual involved, whether willing participants or unwilling victims caught amidst flames ignited from careless actions taken previously. The door swung open, and I was met with the familiar scent of old books and polished wood. My heart raced as I shifted my weight, leaning on my cane for support. Helen stood there, her face a mix of surprise and determination. "Bob," she said, her voice wavering slightly, "what are you doing here?" I took a deep breath, collecting my thoughts like scattered papers in a gusty wind. "I came to talk about the case," I replied, stepping inside. The room felt cramped with tension, as if the walls themselves were holding their breath. She crossed her arms defensively. "Now is not the time, Bob, you know that." An unexpected wave of frustration washed over me. I couldn't let this moment slip away. It was too important. "Helen, this isn't just about them anymore," I insisted, looking into her eyes for the spark of understanding. I could sense the weight of our shared history hanging between us like an untouched book on a shelf. Just then, her assistant poked his head through the doorway, a young man with bright eyes and an eager smile, a refreshing contrast to the heaviness in the air between us. "Helen, we need to finalize those documents for tomorrow's hearing." "Give me a minute," she snapped, turning back to me with renewed urgency. "You can't just waltz in here and expect me to drop everything." That moment hung there like an unlit matchstick waiting for a spark. But something shifted within her. Perhaps it was the assistant's interruption or the reminder of our mission that connected us again. "I'll make time," she finally conceded, resolve threading through her voice like steel through silk. "But you need to promise me no more theatrics." As relief flooded through me, I nodded solemnly, knowing how crucial this moment was for both of us and our cause. The power dynamics had subtly shifted. Now we were allies instead of adversaries. Yet even as we settled into that fragile agreement, a nagging thought lingered at the edge of my mind. What if these new developments changed everything we fought for? The sound of the doorbell echoed through the stillness of the morning, a sharp chime that sliced through the air like a knife. I took a deep breath, my coffee mug warm in my hands, and felt the weight of anticipation settle over me. It was time to confront Cliff about the fake invoice that had upended everything. I opened the door, and there he stood, Cliff, with his usual confident smirk. But today something felt off. His eyes darted around as if searching for an escape route. I gestured him inside, the porch creaking beneath our weight as we stepped into the living room. The tension was palpable, thick enough to cut with a knife. "Hey, Bob," he said casually, but it was a feeble attempt at nonchalance. I could see his fingers twitching at his sides. I placed the fake invoice on the table between us.
its printed words glaring back like accusations. "You read section 4.2?" I asked, my voice steady but firm. His eyes widened slightly, betraying an emotion he couldn't quite mask. There was no hiding the truth from me any longer. This was about honor now, his and mine. He shifted uncomfortably in his seat, leaning forward as if to close the distance between us, while simultaneously trying to retreat into himself. "Bob," he started, but I cut him off. "No excuses," I said sharply. "This isn't just business anymore." That's when Helen entered, the third wheel in our uneasy standoff. She held a stack of HOA letters in her hands, clearly oblivious to the storm brewing between Cliff and me. "Did you get those documents sorted?" she asked brightly, her tone contrasting sharply with the tension hanging in the air. Cliff shot her a look, a flash of panic crossed his face, and for a moment I saw him struggling with how to maintain control over this situation. Helen's presence shifted everything. She was both a distraction and an unexpected ally. "Helen," I said, more gently than before, "we need to talk about Cliff's little scheme here." I pointed at the invoice again, as if it were a ticking bomb waiting to explode. "What do you mean?" Her brow furrowed as she stepped closer to inspect the document more closely. The air thickened with uncertainty as she realized what we were discussing. Cliff leaned back in his chair, defensively, arms crossing over his chest like walls going up around him. "Bob, come on. We can work this out without dragging everyone into it." His voice cracked slightly. It was clear he wasn't expecting Helen's involvement today. But she didn't waver. Instead, she planted her hands on her hips and fixed him with a glare that could pierce steel. "You've put Bob in a terrible position," she said firmly. "We all trusted you." With that simple statement, something shifted in the room. The balance of power tilted away from Cliff and back towards us. The weight of her words hung heavily between us all now. Honor meant something different when shared among friends. "I'm not afraid to take this further," I added softly but resolutely. "It's not just business anymore, it's personal." The walls seemed to close in on Cliff then. He knew he was cornered. His bravado started to crumble under our gaze like brittle leaves in autumn wind. "You wouldn't dare bring this to court," he spat out defiantly, even though we both knew that wasn't true anymore, not after all that had happened. "We'll see about that," I replied coolly, while feeling my pulse quicken at how everything around us felt charged with unspoken consequences, a rubber band stretched tight ready to snap back any moment now. Helen stepped closer again and whispered something just above a hush. "What else are you hiding?" It was directed at Cliff, but felt like an accusation aimed straight for me, too. It wasn't just about him anymore. We were all entangled in this mess together. In response to her question, or perhaps deflection, Cliff suddenly produced another document from his pocket, an old contract that bore signatures long forgotten, yet still relevant somehow, given its implications today, the kind of paper meant for binding deals rather than tearing apart relationships. "Look at this," he thrusted towards us, as if it could magically absolve him of responsibility or guilt somehow, but instead only served to deepen our distrust further still. My heart raced. Every fiber of my being urged me not to trust him again so easily after this betrayal. But curiosity tugged at me nonetheless. What did this new information change? I reached out, cautiously, yet determinedly. The paper felt cool against my fingertips like marble stones warmed by sunlight, an odd metaphor for clarity amidst chaos. As I scanned its contents carefully, while feeling Helen's eyes boring at me expectantly, I caught sight of discrepancies hidden within its folds, tiny details overlooked by someone who thought they'd covered their tracks well enough before now, perhaps. But would revealing them mean losing everything we'd built? Suddenly it dawned on me. Each decision carried weight far beyond mere dollars and cents. The impacted lives intertwined with trust frayed dangerously thin already. And then came Helen's choice, a decisive nod towards supporting whatever course I decided upon next, and Cliff's expression morphed into one filled with dread, knowing full well what lay ahead unless he acted swiftly enough. Just when I thought we might gain ground together against him, we heard footsteps approaching outside, the unmistakable sound of Evan, arriving home early from school, catching everyone off guard. My mind raced frantically while grappling with thoughts swirling chaotically. Should we shield Evan from this mess or let him witness firsthand how fragile honor could be when tested under pressure? The stakes were never higher, as secrets threatened exposure. What would emerge from these moments spent teetering on an edge where friendships hung precariously by threads woven tightly around lies told long ago? Helen's voice trembled as she stepped closer. "Dad, this isn't just about us anymore. It's bigger than our family." I could see the weight of her words hanging between us, like an unyielding fog, thick and suffocating. I clenched my jaw, trying to process what she meant. My heart raced, a runaway train on tracks that felt dangerously unstable. "What do you mean?" I asked, my voice barely above a whisper. She took a deep breath, her eyes glistening with unshed tears. "The rally in town tomorrow. There's going to be a confrontation. The local paper said they're expecting counter-protesters." She paused, gauging my reaction. "They're planning to intimidate anyone who stands up for justice." My stomach dropped at the thought. I had fought so many battles in courtrooms and community meetings, but this was different. It was raw and unpredictable, like fire crackling in a dry field. "We can't let them get away with it," I asserted with my new conviction rising. But Helen shook her head slowly, her brow furrowed with concern. "Going there could put you in danger. You know that." "Danger is part of the job," I replied sharply, frustration bubbling inside me like an overboiling pot. How could she not understand? People were counting on us. "I can't lose you two," she whispered, stepping back as if my words had struck her physically. The distance between us stretched painfully thin. In that moment, a figure emerged from the shadows by the doorway. David, my old friend and fellow attorney. His presence brought an unexpected surge of energy into the room. He looked weary, but determined, his eyes scanning both of ours as if he were measuring the atmosphere. "Bob, Helen," he began, his voice steady despite the tension crackling around us. "I just got off the phone with some contacts at the local police department." "What did they say?" I pressed urgently. "They're bracing for violence tomorrow," David replied gravely. "You need to think carefully about how you approach this." Helen glanced at me, then back at David, as if waiting for guidance from either side. The air was thick with unspoken choices and unresolved fears. Suddenly, it hit me. This was not just about one rally, or even our family's safety. It was about standing firm against oppression and injustice in a way we had never faced before. "We have to go," I declared with newfound resolute. Helen opened her mouth to protest, but quickly closed it again, a storm of emotions flickering across her face. As the three of us stood there in silence, I could feel the power shifting beneath our feet like a tide pulling back just before crashing ashore once more. With every heartbeat, anticipation hung heavy in the air. We were on the brink of something monumental. But even as hope surged within me like spring thawing winter's grip, uncertainty gnawed at my gut. What would happen when the dust finally settled?
The air on the porch felt charged, like static before a storm. I could sense the tension winding tighter as I sat there, fingers drumming against the chipped wood of the railing. Each tap seemed to echo what was left unsaid, a rhythm of unacknowledged grievances hanging heavily between us. Kate stood with her arms crossed, her brow furrowed in that familiar way. Sam paced back and forth, his shoes scuffing against the floorboards, each step a silent protest. I could see Daniel's jaw clenching as he leaned against the wall, his posture rigid. And Megan hovered near Evan, glancing at him as if seeking reassurance while he stared blankly ahead. "Do you really think it's fair?" Kate finally broke the silence, her voice sharp enough to cut through the tension. You can't just decide everything for everyone without even asking." I felt my pulse quicken at her words. It was an accusation that hung in the air like a dark cloud. The last thing we needed was for this family divide to widen further. I took a deep breath, trying to steady my racing heart. "What do you mean by decide everything?" "I'm trying to protect our family," I countered, but doubt crept into my tone. As if sensing my hesitation, Sam stepped forward, his eyes narrowing. "Protect us or control us?" His voice raised slightly, filled with indignation that mirrored my own inner turmoil. The truth was laid bare. This wasn't just about decisions. It was about honor, our collective honor as a family. Just then, an unexpected figure emerged from behind the door. Evan finally spoke up. "You guys have been arguing for hours over nothing." His words were calm, but laced with disappointment. "We can't let this tear us apart." I turned towards him, surprised by his sudden involvement. It struck me that he had been quietly absorbing our discord all along. How often had I overlooked his quiet strength? Suddenly, I realized how crucial his perspective could be in navigating this storm. "Evan's right," I said slowly, weighing my words carefully as they tumbled from my mouth. "We need to come together instead of tearing each other apart over these old wounds." My mind raced with thoughts of what it would take to bridge this divide, yet I sensed resistance still lingered in the air. Kate's expression softened slightly, but only for a moment before she replied sharply. "It's easy for you to say after you've made your choices without consulting any of us." Her finger jabbed at me like an accusing sword. That one gesture ignited something within me, a fire stoked by years of feeling unheard and misunderstood in my own home. "And what do you want me to do? Just sit back and let everything fall apart?" My voice rose involuntarily as frustration bubbled over. Then came Evan again with surprising clarity. "Maybe we all need to sit down and talk openly about what we want, not just what we think is best." There was wisdom in those words that struck me deeply. Perhaps it was time for real dialogue. But before anyone could respond, a gust of wind rustled through the trees surrounding the porch, sending leaves swirling around us like confetti at an unwelcome celebration. It felt symbolic, a reminder of how quickly things could unravel or shift course unexpectedly. "Fine," Kate said reluctantly after a pause that felt like an eternity stretched too thin. "Let's talk, but let's make sure we're honest about our feelings." I nodded slowly. Her willingness to engage reignited hope within me like a flickering candle in darkness. Yet fear still loomed large. Would honesty lead us toward healing or further fracture? As we settled into a tentative circle on the porch steps, ready to confront our issues head-on, I couldn't shake off a gnawing uncertainty about whether exposing our truths would ultimately bind us closer or send us spiraling away from one another forever. The moment hung heavy in the air, a prelude promising both revelation and risk, as I grasped tightly to the armrest beside me like it was a lifeline amidst churning waters beneath our fragile unity. The door swung open with a creak that echoed through the room like a whisper of secrets long held. I glanced up, surprised to see Helen standing there, her face pale yet determined. I could feel the tension in the air shift, as if she were a gust of wind pushing against the weight of unspoken words. "Bob, we need to talk about the case," she said, her voice steady but laced with urgency. I nodded, keeping my eyes on hers. There was something in her gaze that told me this wasn't just another meeting about legal jargon. The stakes were higher. I could sense it. My heart raced slightly as I gestured for her to sit down at my cluttered desk. The papers piled high seemed to reflect my own turmoil, each one representing a life affected by our fight for justice. Helen took a deep breath, and I watched as she gathered her thoughts like loose pages in the wind. "We've uncovered new evidence," she began, her fingers tracing the edge of a file folder. "It's not just hearsay anymore." My pulse quickened. New evidence could change everything. It could turn the tide we'd been battling against for months. "What did you find?" I leaned closer, eager yet apprehensive. Helen hesitated for just a moment, glancing down at the folder before looking back at me. "There's footage from that night, the night they arrested him. It shows something different than what was reported. I felt an electric charge run through me. Footage? This could be pivotal, but doubt crept in like shadows sneaking across the floorboards in the late evening light. Is it enough? I asked quietly, careful not to let my hope spill into desperation. The legality is shaky, she admitted, biting her lip, as though weighing each word carefully. But if we can prove it was manipulated, if we can show intent, it might sway public opinion. In that moment, the gravity of our situation shifted again. Hope flickered cautiously, like a flame fighting against a strong draft. My mind spun with possibilities, while my heart anchored me to reality. I knew how fragile any victory could be. Let's arrange a meeting with the team, I decided firmly, feeling newfound resolve bubbling within me. Helen nodded, but didn't look entirely convinced. She glanced away toward the window where rain was beginning to patter softly against the glass, a soothing backdrop yet ominous reminder of storms ahead. As we began discussing logistics and potential risks, a knock interrupted us. The door swung open again. This time it was Mark, our lead investigator, his brow furrowed and eyes wide with urgency. "Did you hear?" he blurted out before even stepping fully inside. "They're planning a press conference tomorrow morning." I shot Helen a quick glance. We both understood what that meant. This news could go public before we had our ducks in a row. The pressure mounted like steam rising from boiling water, threatening to spill over at any moment. "What do you mean?" I asked slowly as dread settled in my stomach, like an anchor dragging me down into murky waters. Mark took a breath and stepped further into the room as if seeking refuge among familiar faces. "They're bringing in outside experts, claiming our cause is unfounded." His voice trembled slightly with disbelief. The weight of that revelation hit hard. I felt it settle on my shoulders like an old wool coat, too heavy to bear, yet impossible to remove. We need time. We need more clarity before facing those who would twist our story for their gain. I turned back to Helen, who looked equally troubled, yet resolute. A lighthouse amidst turbulent seas, readying herself against incoming waves. "I can't let them spin this narrative first," she said finally, determination radiating from every pore of her as she straightened up in her chair. "A decision made under fire. That's what civil rights work demanded sometimes, swift action amidst chaos and uncertainty." "Let's gather what we can tonight," I suggested urgently after giving Mark a nod of agreement for support. With new renewed energy fueling us forward, we wrote out plans for contacting allies and preparing statements that would counteract whichever lies would spew forth from that conference podium come morning light. Yet, even as adrenaline surged through me, unease remained lodged deep within, like gravel caught in my throat, refusing to budge no matter how much I swallowed or coughed or tried to clear it away. Tomorrow loomed large with its uncertainties and hidden traps waiting patiently around corners unseen. And even with Helen's fierce spirit igniting hope within me once more, I couldn't shake off that lingering question. Would it truly be enough?
The morning air was thick with the promise of heat, and I could hear the faint rustle of leaves as a soft breeze stirred them. I sat on the porch, an old wicker chair cradling me like a mother's embrace. In my hands, I held the latest set of HOA letters, those insidious missives that felt like they were nibbling away at my dignity, line by painful line. Each letter bore the weight of judgment, their printed words sharp enough to draw blood. My fingers traced the edges of the paper, feeling the texture like the grit of betrayal under my skin. This wasn't just about rules, it was about honor. The community I had fought for, stood up for, now seemed intent on tearing down everything I had built. As I read through them again, I could hear Kate's voice in my head. "You read Section 4.2? She had asked yesterday. The way she spoke those words made them feel like daggers aimed right at my integrity. Section 4.2 was about maintaining decorum in communal spaces, a vague guideline that felt more like a noose tightening around me. I sat on the porch, an old wicker chair cradling me like a mother's embrace. In my hands, I held the latest set of HOA letters, those insidious missives that felt like they were nibbling away at my dignity, line by painful line. Each letter bore the weight of judgment, their printed words sharp enough to draw blood. My fingers traced the edges of the paper, feeling the texture like the grit of betrayal under my skin. This wasn't just about rules, it was about honor. The community I had fought for, stood up for, now seemed intent on tearing down everything I had built. As I read through them again, I could hear Kate's voice in my head. "You read Section 4.2? She had asked yesterday. The way she spoke those words made them feel like daggers aimed right at my integrity. Section 4.2 was about maintaining decorum in communal spaces, a vague guideline that felt more like a noose tightening around me. I glanced toward the driveway, half expecting to see one of my neighbors pull up and confront me again. Just then, Daniel appeared from around the corner, my son, his brow furrowed as if carrying the weight of his own battles. His arrival brought a fresh wave of tension that crackled in the air between us. "Dad," he said, his voice low but clear, "have you thought about what you're going to do?" I sighed deeply, setting down the letters with a finality that echoed off the porch railing. "What can I do? They're throwing accusations left and right." Daniel stepped closer, his eyes scanning my face for answers he knew didn't exist. "You can fight back," he urged. "We deserve better than this." The urgency in his tone pulled me upright, igniting something inside, an ember's flicker turning into flame. But doubt lingered like smoke in my lungs. Fighting meant exposing our family to scrutiny, and scrutiny came with its own dangers. "They'll dig up things we don't want out," I replied cautiously. Suddenly, a figure appeared at the end of our driveway, Evan, my youngest son, looking as though he'd just stepped out of a storm himself. He approached with purpose, but paused halfway up the path when he caught sight of Daniel and me standing there. "What's going on?" Evan asked, concern etching lines across his youthful face. "We're discussing these letters," I said flatly, before gesturing toward the papers spread out before me as if they were cursed artifacts rather than mundane bureaucratic demands. "They're not just letters, they're attacks," Evan countered sharply, stepping forward with conviction. "They know we've been involved in civil rights cases for years. They want to shut us down." The truth hit like a cold wind against warm skin. It gathered momentum and pushed against every wall I had put up over time. They weren't just targeting our home, they were targeting our legacy. Daniel nodded vigorously beside me, while Evan's intensity radiated through him like heat waves shimmering from black asphalt under summer sun. Their passion was intoxicating, yet dangerous all at once. What would be sacrificed if we decided to stand firm? "Then let's show them who we are," Daniel urged fervently. The resolve in their voices sparked something deep within me. A flame long stifled by doubt and fear began to flicker again in my heart. Maybe it wasn't too late to reclaim our honor. But then reality crashed back in. The consequences could be severe. Reputations marred beyond repair, or worse yet, broken relationships among those I once considered friends or allies now turned adversaries over property lines and petty grievances. "Are you ready for what this could mean?" I asked them softly, almost pleadingly. They exchanged glances filled with understanding and determination, a silent pact forming between brothers that felt heavier than any weight I'd carried alone before now. "I'm ready," Evan said quietly but firmly, as though sealing an oath with those words alone. My gaze dropped to the letters again. Their pristine surfaces now seemed tainted by their intentions, and suddenly they transformed from mere pieces of paper into symbols of defiance against injustice itself. In that moment, clarity washed over me. These letters may be weapons wielded against us, but perhaps they also contain power we could harness if only we dared to act decisively rather than cower beneath their threats. "Okay," I finally breathed out slowly as realization set fire within me, a decision forged from ashes, and turned toward both boys with renewed strength flowing through my veins like molten steel readying itself for battle ahead. But even as courage began to swell inside me like tides reclaiming land lost over time, another thought nagged at my mind. What if taking this path meant sacrificing more than we bargained for? Could honor truly protect us when faced with relentless scrutiny? Or would it lead us deeper into treacherous waters where everything we built could crumble beneath heavy waves crashing down upon us? These questions lingered as shadows danced along our porch railing, their answers hidden just beyond reach, despite how close victory felt now. waiting patiently like ghosts haunting corners long forgotten amidst rising tension, fueled by unyielding love, entwined with fierce loyalty, urging us onward despite uncertainty looming large ahead. The door creaked open, and I felt a rush of cold air. My heart raced as I saw Helen standing there, her face pale but resolute. She had always been the anchor in my life, but today she seemed like a ship caught in a storm, teetering on the brink of sinking. "What are you doing here?" I asked, my voice barely above a whisper. The sight of her lifted the weight off my chest for just a moment before reality crashed back down. We're in this fight together, yet somehow it felt like we were worlds apart. "She came to talk," she said, stepping into the room and closing the door behind her. Her eyes darted around as if searching for something hidden among the shadows. "You can't go through with this trial without me." I clenched my fists at my sides. "Helen, you know how dangerous this is. They'll stop at nothing to silence us." The thought of her being dragged into this battle made my stomach churn like a whirlpool. "I'm not afraid," she replied firmly, crossing her arms over her chest. "You fought too long and too hard for our community to back down now." Her courage was intoxicating, but fear still gnawed at me like a ravenous beast. Suddenly, Helen's gaze sharpened, fixing on a file on my desk that held evidence we had collected, tangible proof of discrimination against our clients. "What do you have in there?" she asked, reaching out to grab it. "It's nothing," I lied instinctively, but she wouldn't be so easily swayed. With deft fingers, she snatched the folder from my grasp and flipped it open. As she scanned the pages, an expression of shock crossed her face before it hardened into determination. "Bob, this could change everything." Her voice trembled with excitement, but was laced with caution. I took a deep breath. I could feel the tension in the room shift as if someone had pulled taut a string between us. "Yes, but they'll come after us hard if they find out we have this." I tried to deflate her enthusiasm. It felt safer that way. "I don't care," she declared with fierce conviction. "We need to expose them for what they are." There was an undeniable fire in her voice that ignited something within me too, an ember refusing to extinguish despite the odds stacked against us. "All right," I said slowly, weighing each word carefully. "If we're going to do this together, then we need more than just courage. We need a plan." Just as Helen began outlining ideas about rallying support from local activists and legal aid groups, there was a loud knock on the door that echoed through the quiet room like thunder rolling across darkening skies. My heart sank. Time was running out faster than I anticipated. "Who is it?" I called out cautiously as dread washed over me, the kind that seeps into your bones and chills you to your core. "It's Agent Morris," came the voice from behind the door, a voice filled with authority and malice that sent shivers down my spine. I locked eyes with Helen just as realization dawned upon us both. Our window of opportunity was closing rapidly. The stakes had never been higher. Failure wasn't just an option, it would cost us everything we fought for. "Bob," Helen whispered urgently. There was something unresolved glimmering beneath that fear-laden surface, something waiting to be revealed amidst uncertainty's fog.